Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two terrific poets with us today, Jimmy Vega and Giovan Alonzi. Jimmy will read first and then Giovan. Jimmy Vega is the author of Zirconium Ash, What Books Press 2025, and he is the Associate Director of Beyond Broke Literary Arts Center. He lives and works in Los Angeles. Here's a wonderful poet, Jimmy Vega.
Hey, thanks, Harry. Thanks for that warm welcome. I'm excited to be part of this, to be part of your poetry hour. I'm going to kick us off with a poem made up of borrowed lines from Wanda Coleman. This is a poem in the form of a cento. And to remind you of what a cento is, it's essentially a poem composed of borrowed lines, and in this case, composed of all lines by Wanda Coleman. Harry mentioned at the top that I'm the associate director of Beyond Baroque. I'm actually the interim now, the interim executive director of Beyond Baroque. And for those who have been to the space before, you know that we have a theater named after Wanda. Our Wanda Coleman Theater. So this one is Reading Wanda Under the Sepulveda Boulevard Tunnel for Wanda Coleman. I do good things for the good dead. Now they're beating dead metaphors. How then they moan. Will we ever breathe again? After a hasty search of his mind, he found nothing. Not nearly enough to be priced out of existence. Things wait until funds are insufficient. Still, my gender, my skirt spotted with red after sitting, chance driving on the rim of meaning. It's cheaper, and all the intellectuals are walking. The naked camera reveals the absence. Half-seen ghosts appear on the edges of catnaps and confusions. I've found old rhythms to new blues. Foolish in my fantasy, that I too am cherished. Someone drives. There are fingers pointing in this strange revolt where I loot sentences for sustenance. Never having quite awakened from sleep, there will be no spring this year. Tonight, I'll sleep with both eyes open. This next poem is kind of a short poem, I guess by some of my standards, but yeah, it's a poem that's gonna come out in my debut poetry collection, Zirconium Ash. This one is for Larkin Marie Higgins. We go to Washington next week. Language, it seems, does not snake. A cross street without name dimly lingers. Never have I ever smiled catching gaze of a Monet. Inside a dentist office, pressure crystallizes into plastic ocean sawdust, and I am no longer fun, no longer a myopic twinkle, a familiar harmony. A long, wavering sentimentality. This is what they call a poem in semiotics. In the morning, you say a word like oscillating. This next poem is included in the Beyond Baroque published anthology Poetry Goes to the Movies. I hope you can see that on the screen okay. It captures 101 poets, all reading about the movies, about films, about different kinds of movies, about working in the industry, about being a fan of movies. And I was fortunate enough to have a poem in this collection. Poetry Goes to the Movies, again, out with Beyond Baroque Books. You can find it at our bookstore. And like I said, 101 poets in this anthology. So it's quite really it's really remarkable, I think. And our good friend Harry Northup is in here as well. And so I wanted to read the poem that's in there of mine's. It's from the movie The Shining. And yeah, just one of my favorite horror films, or probably just even one of my favorite films of all time. This one is called Room 237. The last time I watched The Shining on the big screen, we shared caramel corn and I lost the car keys inside your coral reef smile. Your eyes like Shelley Duvall's, glossy and silver like wet algae on concrete. You still sniffle when you cry as you pour red rum on ice, and I was all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work, no play, Jack. Coastal freeway, cold and catatonic. 65 on the 105, weak, night, quiet and starless and ocean. What color were your dashboard lights inside that Yaris? Black North Face windbreakers, maybe in 68 degrees windless spring nights. Salt of your gray blue voice, transient ocean breeze on the tip of my tongue. And you didn't flinch when Jack Nicholson and blood appeared on screen. The last time I watched The Shining on the big screen, my voice was blood red, and you whispered, "Darling, light of my life," as I ordered a medium root beer and your retina quivered like dying jellyfish. No one cared about the vanishing ecosystem then. This next piece, as I was kind of getting, a little bit of a set list going for today, a lot of my work, a lot of my poetry, is situated inside of a car or it takes place in a city. And so one of the, we've gotten the Sepulveda Boulevard Tunnel. We also got through this idea of going to Washington next week. And so this next poem is titled, "Are We Like Somewhere in Sacramento?" Today, I saw a chrysalis and thought of you, waiting for my algorithm to digitize my own nostalgia. Way I feel invisible in July Christmas. There is a tree inside a room somewhere in Los Angeles. Have you seen them? Behind the curtain of the fireworks sky lawn, behind the tongue-tied solo cup martini impression. Sucks being the coolest kid in the room, but when I entered the Fred Meyer for my taxes and a lobotomy, there was something about denial that I refused to chew. Yet everyone watched me lacing up my surveilled body inside fiberglass container, guilty of everything. And I'm going to read this. This will be my last poem. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Harry, for inviting me, and Gio for agreeing to be part of this. I'm really excited to hear your work and to see you read. This poem was actually given to me as a prompt by one of my team members over at Beyond Baroque to write a rap poem. And I think this prompt was given to a few of us, and I loved it because it gave me the opportunity to maybe think about something different or new, and to try to lean into to whatever a rap poem might be. And so what I ended up doing, I love watching movies, but I specifically also love hearing movies. I find a lot of good lines in films, old, new, what have you. And so a lot of the times I'll be writing or I'll be working and I might have a film in the background. And so part of this whole process, part of this whole poem is I was kind of not necessarily searching for any kind of dialogue or lines that would include rats or mentions any rats. But for whatever reason, as I was working on this piece, that was kind of part of the assignment too, was to collect phrases and lines spoken in films that had to do with rats. And so this is my rat poem. It's a new piece, and it's so it borrows, a few lines from a few different movies actually. This one's called "Charlie's the Mouse That Got You Into the Maze. I'm the rat that knows how to cheese." On the second day, pink purple cotton candy like tulips die, the ones at the neighbor houses during a looming recession. Even car dealers put shiny new price tags on their overpriced steel cages. My little prince, my Toyota Celica. There's an ancient Roman Catholic tradition in me, the moist belly of a tortoise, the pinching bite of wasted time, passed on by blood, passed on by clinching rosary beads, passed on by anxiety found in the marrow of force majeure. I keep staining the house with ash. Today, the astronauts arrived, parked in the ocean somewhere in Florida. Tonight, return to Earth. As the tulips the neighbor plants remind me that the world is ending again, crashing out all day only to put a filter on it. Cue sequential collateral damage by the kitchen sink. So I record bird song and telepathically show my brother the music and the faint wind chimes and the competing roar of metal alloy bird engine tube. I say the plan becomes null and void once you find out we got a rat in the house. Late stage capitalism is eating me too. Can't you read or scroll enough to double tap the bric-a-brac you've devoted all your fleeting time to? The one that gnaws, one that yawns toward liberation, that old school classic inertia feeling. When's the last time you went to Mall World? The last time you were aware of your own surveillance? On the rat teeth of the freeway overpass, closure is simply collapse. I want to smile without permission, garden while rupture becomes a burning city. Quiet pressure till we all have broken backs, no language to call a pig, or a rat, filthy, stinking bear trap. Or something more deadly like the loss of due process or the snail death of what we once called democracy in America. These days, my subterranean existence refuses to lie, even to me. There's ash in the wine from the fires of the Malibu Canyon, my therapist proclaims, as I contemplate future shock, taking inventory of all my grammar of grief, of gasoline, bread, milk, and brown sugar, reading present day apocalyptic transmutation in future past. Today, the angel on Sepulveda, sharp traffic waving at every motorist, regardless of car brand, regardless of tint, regardless of reciprocation, gesturing towards divination addendum. Blue freeway flowers on the 105, dusky blue. My girl, these foos can't catch a break. Get in, ride shotgun, everybody loves a winner. More gasoline till we're drunk on fossil fuel roulette similitude. Today, I was only really scared of 1 6-foot-something man who in many ways perpetuated patriarchy. His angry teeth gnashed towards my direction. Never rat on your friends, or else superimpose my fecundity. I want to hear everybody eat. Coral reef decaying inside my car isn't surrealism. It's a cry for help. How many ways to say we're destroying our planet? The city goes too. You'll see. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy, for such a marvelous reading. You have such great range and depth in your poetry. It's lyrical, it's precise, it's erudite, it's harmonious. And I just love the tone of your writing. You're great. This is the first time I've heard you read. And excuse me, pardon me for, associate director. I'm glad you're the director. I'm glad you're the director. I love Beyond Broke. I started there in 1968, and I was in the first poetry workshop in early February 1959. So I just love Beyond Broke. It's a #1 poetry center west of the St. Mark's Church in New York City. And all of us poets, you mentioned Wanda. I was in the workshop there when she came along, and we all met there. And so thank you for the work you've done there and the work you're doing there now. What a great place it is. So thank you for your contribution to poetry, your own writing. So thank you, Jimmy. I have a couple of questions to ask you. When did you write your first poem?
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, thanks for everything and everything you've contributed to Beyond Broke. We love you, and we love seeing you around when you make it out there. That's a hard question. I actually don't know. I think I got into poetry, though. I will say I got into poetry through music. And so, as soon as I got into a variety of different artists and bands, I at an early age I was transfixed by their lyrics and would often go to when they had CD booklets at the times, would often go to those lyrics and try to write my own. So maybe my first poem was actually a song, maybe a couple of lines of lyrics for a song. But yeah, that's a hard one.
Well, you mentioned getting lines from movies. There's a couple of lines that I love, in From Here to Eternity. At the end of the movie, Robert E. Lee Pruitt, played by Monty Cliff, and he's with Donna Reed. I forget her character's name, and he's been mistreated by the Army. The head guy wants him to box, and he refuses, etc. And so he said he's going to re-enlist. And she said, "Why do you want to re-up the way the Army's treated you?" And he said, "Just because you love something doesn't mean it has to love you back." And so I identify with what you're talking about. What is it that attracts you to the poetry form?
I think I'm really transfixed by maybe the container, right? Looking at the poem as a container, and I like that, having that space to create art, and to play with language, or even to try to interrogate or understand language, but to have it in that container. Sometimes the container might be in a specific form. Let's call it maybe a sonnet. Sometimes it might not have line breaks, and we can call that a prose poem. But whatever form it takes, I really enjoy working within those constraints of the container, and trying to see what can potentially be possible in that written form. But then even more so, how can we activate it to the auditory, right? Because when you read a poem, that also does something new and different to how it might appear on the page as well.
And who are some of the poets who influenced you before you started writing poetry in a regular way?
That's a great question. Quite recently we lost the great activist Assata Shakur, and Assata was actually, I remember having that book, having that diary of Assata, those letters, at a very young age, maybe in middle school. And that was one of the first times that I remember, being presented a book where I kind of saw myself in that language, in that storytelling, in that life. So definitely someone like Asada Shakur is one of those people who, at an early age was someone that I was looking up to even before I understood what poetry really was or what it could do.
I really have never talked to you, to this depth. I've seen you at Beyond Broke, obviously, the times I've been there and you were there, and I've always loved the work you do there, as I said. Could you just tell us a little bit about your life, where you were born, where you were raised, where you went to school?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. So I've been here all my life and will probably never leave. I really do love it here. I love the city. I love the people and the cultures that make this whole city bright. I specifically went to school and was living in Linwood for a big part of my life. And for those of you who don't know, Linwood, California is a small little city right next to Compton and right next to Watts. And so a big part of my upbringing was there in the Southeast Los Angeles community, unincorporated Linwood. And it was kind of a very small city in the middle of Los Angeles. And that really, I think, reinforced how I look at art, how I think about poetry, the things that come up in my art or in my writing. So I give a lot of thanks to that community. And like I said, yeah, still in Linwood. I'm still a little closer to Beyond Baroque these days. I live in West Adams. I went to school at UCLA for my undergrad, and I studied English with a concentration in poetry and an emphasis in creative writing. And then right after that, I went to a graduate program for creative writing over at CalArts, and continued to create there. And really, that's where I really started to broaden my understanding of art. And being amongst the people at CalArts, my cohort especially, I mean, I really got the opportunity to not only focus on poetry, yes, but to look at all the other arts that I've been a part of. I mean, I've been a musician as early as 10. So I got the opportunity to continue to play, to get into more performance type stuff, to write certainly, and to break apart what I thought writing was or could be. But yeah, just getting an opportunity to also look at graphic design and, a little bit of drawing here and there. And, it's all been a great ride so far.
And what led you to Beyond Baroque? And when did you go there?
Yeah, I was introduced during my undergrad at UCLA. My dear friend, mentor, Karen Kevorkian, she was a board member at the time and had mentioned Beyond Baroque. And so I checked it out, went to a couple readings, really liked the place. And I think the next quarter they were looking for an intern, and I decided to apply and reach out, and haven't left since. So.
Well, Beyond Baroque, it just keeps growing, and you and Quentin before you and the others, Jimmy, who have all worked there, have just done a marvelous job. And, I always love Beyond Baroque, no matter who's in charge out there. I just support it wholeheartedly. I know over the years, they've done so many magazines and books, et cetera. It's really a flourishing place. And thank you for all your work there. What else would you like to say, just to let us know about, we have a couple of minutes left. What is important to you right now, and looking at what's going on in the world, and what poetry, what's important in poetry to you to address?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As we know, these days we have a long list of different issues, both here domestically, but globally, And I think a lot of the things that we can do as artists is to open up space if you have it. I mean, that's a big factor of what we do, a big part of what we do at Beyond Baroque. As you know, Harry, we have a beautiful space, a brick and mortar space where people can gather to listen to poetry, shop around in our bookstore, take a look at our galleries. So for us, it's important to keep that space available during these times of crisis. But as poets, I mean, we need to continue to create. We need to continue to be there on the front lines, to really further humanity, right? I mean, because that's what we're doing as artists and as poets is we're taking human experiences that are ours, at times maybe experiences that we're fabricating, creating, remixing, what have you. But if we can share a poem with one another, and if we can find common ground through art, that can be a very happy thing, is to extend a hand and see one another as humans, and to look at the world maybe in the sense of creating and not destroying.
I love that. And I've gone to so many shows there, and I remember I went to one, and it was a woman who was from Cuba, and she got up and she talked about how people try to categorize her, and she came here with her mom after Castro took over, in the early '60s, and then she started reading about how she got into the literary world, and just the spotlight on her, that the black walls and the curtain, and just a human being, one person standing in front of the mic behind the podium and talking personally about her experience. It's as great a medium, obviously much longer in terms of history than the mass media we have today, even though, we all love movies and music, TV, etc. But I cherish Beyond Baroque with all my heart. And I'm so thankful that you work there, and all that you're giving and all that you are giving. And also, thank you very much for your just superlative reading. I really enjoy your writing. It's just beautiful. So thank you, Jimmy Vega.
Thank you, Harry.
Giovan Alonzi holds an MFA in creative writing from Cal Arts, where his thesis was awarded the excuse my pronunciation, Kuriyama Memorial Thesis Award. His poetry and essays have appeared in Fence, Los Angeles Review of Books, Rivulet, Full Stop, and elsewhere. He teaches writing composition at Cal State University Northridge in both the English department and the Department of Central American and Transborder Studies. He is a third-generation Angelino who grew up in Van Nuys. He, his wife, and their daughter live in West LA on Tongva land. Here's a marvelous poet, Giovan Alonzi.
Thank you so much, Harry. And of course, Jimmy, thank you for starting us off with your incredible work. That was such a treat, and I'm excited to, talk a little bit after I finish reading. I'm going to be reading from a manuscript that I've been working on for a little while. That is where I am. The point of the manuscript, I'm reimagining the Homeric Cyclops Polyphemus as a familial, commercial, and national ancestor. So I'm going to be reading a few different forms, and that sort of explore the meaning of who this character was literally, and then expanding out to, of course, the episode in the Odyssey where he's famously blinded by Odysseus. And so I'm thinking a lot about sight myopia, in both figurative, literal, metaphorical ways. This first poem is called Camera. Two points on a stream, one yawning, one contracting, depending on one another for their natural shapes, like a king's false memories of a kingdom of false memories, not far from that ancient ocean zone swaddling the storms. Choking and growing tired, a city bus moves through the architecture of our souls. Your thick frames, your thick waist, your thick mouth, your thick ways welcome me on this short trip home. You're buried in brown bags bursting with carrot tops and wine dark folklore. We're just passing Olympic when I understand you've fallen asleep. The bus is full and I'm the only witness. The kingdom of Los Angeles has been abandoned for a time beyond invention by an immigrant. What will become of the kingdom? The colossal windshield gives me one last look at the second aisle of your birth before the bus whispers and awakens our destination. It's unclear if either of us are leaving. We both rise to the surface of a pot of boiling water without moving or saying goodbye. You are the first camera. You snap a picture. It seems we've left the common fantasy of crossing for the full-blown odyssey of a loss for words. I forgot to read the subtitle of this poem. The subtitle is "Where I am my father and I am a child en route with my uncle, the barber, who many, many years before this dream lost an eye." The next poem I'm reading is an erasure poem. And just to remind anyone, right, an erasure poem where you take an existing work and you erase lines from it to reveal a new poem. This is an erasure of chapter 1 of Ralph Waldo Emerson's Nature, the book that kind of put him on the map and was sort of mockingly reviewed as transcendentalist. But that name stuck, and of course, we still talk about American transcendentalism to this day. So this is an erasure of chapter 1 of Nature. It's called Chapter 1. Nobody with stars. One perpetual night, and animals delight the mind. The landscape of none whose eye the poet farms. Superficial sun of manhood runs alone to the brink of nature. My transparent eyeball bows in the storm, always tricked by a dear friend. Something I'm exploring in these various treatments, right, of the interaction between Odysseus and Polyphemus. Of course, trickery, the way Odysseus sort of defeats Polyphemus, the monstrous Cyclops, is before he tricks him, before he blinds him, he tells Polyphemus that his name's Nobody. And this, of course, is a way for Odysseus to cover his tracks after he blinds him. So you may be hearing a few more times me using the word nobody, and right, there's an intentional sort of layered sort of situation that I'm constructing here. So this poem is a little bit longer. It's imagining now the moment that Polyphemus is sort of roaming the island, which also should mention for context, right? Some people have theorized that the island that this is happening on is modern day Sicily. I'll take it from there. This is called Buttonhole, or and Polyphemus arose from the earth, and when his eye was opened, he saw no man. Bar of stitches, left alone by the lull, button torn. A sibling with no sibling, abreast of a legend, a small corporation for love, a small corporation of words for love, dressed in flesh. Tanned with tintinnabulations, anything that sings for blood's repetition, like that river I began with a rock and a boy, covered in flocks, a way to slow telling gathers in my ear. Like sheep, memory of light is newborn warm. Now my eye cannot swaddle that scream of gold, humming like distance, horny as a nugget, side wanting side, a pill bug aching to unfold my heroic poem in the salt and the rocks gnashing at the shore. The day's ripped dress trailing clean into cave, a single burning stake in sight. Fate can pretend to be my interruption. My eye only imbues what it figures full, the same way war paint imbues paint with idioms. Houseless color of the eye, tang of nobody's name. Somehow this island is how I gather what is not. My seasons describe a place to play, I suppose. Dreaming Galatea's milk, her skin in my mouth. No thoughts, just animals, self-same. They are both there without intelligence, cloven, colorless, eye without eye. Line formed by lips, wrinkling crimes, tiny legs robbing pollen, sagas calling shotgun, water image, cutting water. Cyclone abandoned by flutes, veins broken open in the company of rocks. I for one less urge, a survivor at the river for something other than water. Ask Assis why I do not mourn for this thirst. I tap language for syrup, premeditated killing of words. Slung long to wind, Jaculus-like, Earth's eyewitness, dying silver through evacuated light, the pock-marked pock in the silence, that mug always far off, a feral god drinking. Dirt winks, and I hear her in the pooling sky, unbroken as a bruise. The terror of old growth light-born, eyes slip through what's spilt, and everything that is new comes through what splits. Rock bends a riverbed toward a lake of desolation. Dreams get rich and loamy. Stinging nettles and their shyness grow as easily as fire. Butterflies called commas start to mimic bird shit and dead leaves. Syntax slides between the air and the sea. Wind's eye tangled in cyclones, decreating elephant skulls, the only real spit in my song. A silent letter, suspended in yoke on the tip of my tongue, unbroken. Sound is lewd. Molten fish are plating boiling gold, and sable pressure at the ocean floor, revealing the core of living. Depth moves blood, with its whip called cold. Everything is hard. And it's easy to be slippery, constantly looking for where I will fall. How will I find the only hole below unbroken, cousin? The eye of a needle reads my delirium. Greenskeeping love, free to keep what feeds my ever tongue for the inferno. Near surface veins expose the gypsum left over from another beginning. No zone for what's wild. Natal ash clarifies where shapes, crippled and raw, raise their arms. Divination of the U and its poison. Any number of eyes like ripe artichokes before they burst fully purpled. Squall to calm's collaged pilgrimage. Gossip births a small universe and its wake. Snap, 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 snap. Drizzling to a yawn, a long song. The dust of gasps hatched, pits nurturing their swirling putties and mash, netted white caps vacuum smacked with gaps. Quaking, chest tender to the beating, drops, a litter wet and swelling above the swells. A bottom of the sky pressed against the ocean, and just enough cave to find omission of my father. I hear of how I was sculpted and how I was played with. Men connecting centuries by the eyes they plucked. Pupil of the pupae eating its eggshells. In the early sanity of dolls, I too found humanity first. Like a son becoming his own father's father. Ptarmigan's spelling kept by mistake, finding its shape in the tundra by not being seen. Still, wings made of quills and oars are loyal to their lines, mapping the first river drawn to the unknown parts tearing us apart, imagining me and I inside, salt and secrecy, split to harmonies. Christ removed by current era, my panpiping prepping for the end of the book. Counterfeit words are difficult to hide when they are seen for what they aren't. So too are the little hours where I splash. Before I cook in the waves and the sun taste of my psalms, carbon chasing after carbon copy, black canopy unlearns the blue cling. The question of my birth purpling the shade with fresh meat, non sequiturs, and vicious summaries of virginity. Miles of brain touched by the gore of earthly orbits and the crusty theories of women. Beastly fable. I am looking for an able-bodied man. Removing land from my mouth reveals nobody. To say he must die means he won't. Exiled to the page torn away by the wind, blinding as a promise kept like a slave, flood-lit flood moving through the horror of paradise found, resisting that gift from nobody, not seeing my body. Exactitude, something that can't be seen. A pocket, my new face. What I, being Cyclops, like thin layers of paper, learned from skin. Blood in the water must unravel its nebula. Fingers blurred and full, finding it all. It does not teach me to be good. Crimped by a title surname, hot and glassy image, no eye need open. The night starts consuming like the beaks of watching octopi, listening for an antsy sound in ancestry, turn to fresh salt separate from its water. Yeasty amputations growing into treasure. creatures ever stranger, because to treasure is to grieve. Can anything somewhere else then? Else I squat, crammed with as much potential innocence as a cell in a winter of sentences. Fish eyes great flesh, jiggling world of the what I was before manacling thoughts to dreams. Speak of the beauty of being worn and sick. Do I not believe in the fatness of life? Lunar as blood, between being full of nothing and nothing left, and a little number then and there. Human heirs and errors looped like every last blind thread of the uncuttable knot. This gooey pillow I wear, one ought left in my argument of sounds, coating this cave with mouth paintings. Seashell buttons and crabs. I want to eat myself. More than sleep, starved of weakness, something slips, my deepest joke. Gain said, I find a tear. Exit Ulysses' hole. I'll stop there. That was a long one.
Thank you, Giovan, for such a luminous reading. Mining and reinventing and reimagining that episode in the Odyssey, and the way your lines just keep unfolding from what you presented before, and your creation of harmony, and you use such superb language. And I just love what you're doing with that. It's something that most of us in the literary world have studied, the Odyssey. I've probably read 4 translations of it, and it's one of the great books of the West, as you know. And so thank you very much for your clarity and the epic nature of what you're dealing with. How do you sustain it? How do you sustain the work, and how do you refine your work, or do you just write it? And tell us a little bit about how you put this work together.
Of course. Thank you, Harry. It's been a very slow process, especially this last part. This is the first time I've read all of that piece together, especially since it's a little bit longer. And it's seen many different forms. I've been patient. I think maybe the first word that came to mind was patience. I've been eager for that last poem, the buttonhole, to be done at certain points, and with the time I've given it, I've been able to come back and see other possibilities, other ways in and other ways out of, I don't know, the experience that I think I'm trying to communicate. I think that more than anything, I'm always a big believer in separating the writing process from the editing process. And I think that I haven't, I've been sort of tinkering with this piece for a few years, and it feels, it sort of has that, I guess, ineffable rightness to it now. But hey, in a year from now, we'll see. We'll come back to it. We'll see if it still feels that way.
I love it. I love the way it insists itself. So you're doing fabulous. So thank you for that. I love the long poem. I've done a number of long poems in series, so I appreciate that. What attracts you to poetry? But before you answer that, when did you write your first poem?
A few years ago. I don't know the exact one. I'm sure the first poem I read, or that I wrote, I'm sure was in when I was very young, maybe in I don't know, sometime in elementary school. But I will say that the poem that came to mind when you asked Jimmy that question a few years ago, I found a poem that I wrote for a class in high school after reading the novel All Quiet on the Western Front. And it was interesting to return to this poem because, first of all, when I returned to it, it was a project that didn't get I didn't do well on this assignment for whatever reason. Honestly think the teacher didn't like me for whatever reason. But I included as part of it, I included this poem, not unlike reinterpreting, an existing work. And I turned a lot of the events of All Quiet on the Western Front into an original poem. And upon reading it, there was a note on it that said, who wrote this poem? And it was expecting like a citation, like as if I'd cited this poem or something. And it was just funny to me to be like, wow, I tried so hard to incorporate some creative work into this assignment. And the only feedback I got on it was like, why didn't you cite this poem that you included in your assignment? And so coming back to this, anyways, it was also exciting because I actually saw a sensibility that I feel now. I saw a sensibility in, a 15-year-old, 16-year-old self that was exciting to return to. So I'm gonna say on the record, my first poem was about All Quiet on the Western Front.
Well, thank you for that. Jimmy, why don't you come on? We have about 4 minutes left, and we can all talk together. Giovan, since you just finished, why don't you say a few things about Jimmy's poetry and then vice versa?
Absolutely. I would be honored to. Jimmy, you incorporate some things in the poems you read today. I couldn't help but think about, my shared love of ekphrastic poetry, especially writing about The Shining. And, but a point you made in the last poem you shared, just to be right, you were saying the category was rat poem, right?
That was it. Yeah, that was the prompt. It was write a rat poem.
So what I loved about what you shared was how everything seemed to become a rat, but also that a rat did not mean one thing, that a rat meant multiple things. And I love this attempt, and I felt aligned with it, honestly, in some of the work I was sharing, where I'm trying to like push a meaning of an accepted sort of idea of something. And I just love when you said late stage capitalism, when you compared late stage capitalism to the rat, I couldn't help but think about the movie Parasite. And because in that movie, right, Bong Joon-ho does this incredible reversal where, the parasite, the argument I think of the movie is that the parasite is the like rich household of right. And I think that your inversion, that by exploding the meaning, you create both empathy for the rat and a respect for the rat, and also you keep the meanings of the rat around, of course. I don't know, maybe dare I say the bootlicking side of the rat. So I was really moved by that element of your poem. So I was happy to hear it. Did any of that? Did I hear you right?
Yeah. No, thanks for that. Yeah. I mean, I go back to what Harry said about your work. This unfurling, like that I think we definitely got to experience in both of our work. And that last piece, I mean, when you were talking about the eyes and the myopia, I mean, I feel like I have several pieces that, zone in on the eye. And then you kind of start, you talked about the project, and then you started with that first poem, about the camera. And I was like, yep, there we go. That was, right before you even get to the poem, we're experiencing some of that, call it unfurling, or call it, I don't know, an expansion of what you are really trying to communicate or align, and love the different forms and registers that they were taking. I mean, you mentioned one of them being an erasure poem, which was cool to hear. But yeah, very multi-layered, and love the work that you do, Gio.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Well, you guys both have such erudition, and you're both, telling your stories in your own way with your new forms. And so I really appreciate that, the depth of your knowledge too, and you're both well-educated, Cal Arts, both of you, right? Which is one of the great schools in our neighborhood. And so thank you for that. And thank you for your care for your fellow poets too, as well. And you're much younger than I am. I'm 85 years old, so I'm so happy that you guys are just blazing your own trail. And so it's really been an enlightening and an erudite reading that you two have given us. And I'm always so thankful for this show to meet two new people through their poetry. I've met Jimmy before, obviously, but to meet you too, Giovan, but to hear your poetry, so thank you very much for blessing, the poetry show. And, we keep going and we keep our creativity alive. And, we're putting the poetic rhythm, in a clear way out into the prosaic world. And so that's a good thing, lifting it up into song. So thank you once again, Jimmy Vega and Giovan Alonzi.